Hello, good morning. Today I would like to deal with the issue of why, from my point of view, it is very important to use language one in order to learn language two. The first thing we do when we have students and we want to introduce them into English is we usually tell them that they must never translate. They must never translate. Well, that's a little bit difficult, considering that your first language is so very deep-rooted in your mind and in your consciousness that I sometimes, and I think I'm not the only one, I sometimes wonder whether my conceptualization of life comes from my language or my language comes from my conceptualization of life. The thing is that we frame our thoughts with our language and they come up at the same time or almost at the same time. So the moment you think that you want to tell someone something, you think it up in your own mother tongue. The problem with chunks is that if you learn with chunks, by using chunks, when you have a high level of English, that's very useful in the sense that you control the language so well that you can decide when and how to adapt it to the situational context and the linguistic context. The problem with low-level students is that they fail to do so because their knowledge of the language is not that comprehensive. So what we are doing is fragmenting language learning, which is translated into fragmenting our thoughts. But the problem is that when we speak, we go from here to here. So we lack that flexibility of mind if we fragment our thoughts. I mean, we lack the flexibility of mind to express what we want to say. And the problem is that we keep a kind of frozen expression that we use here and there and now. And we cannot use the same thing to express something similar, but in different circumstances or in a different context. For example, if we teach our students that when you ask what the weather is like, I mean, ¿qué tiempo hace en Londres? I mean, the corresponding sentence in English will be, what's the weather like in London? The problem is that they cannot change that to use, and they don't know when they have to use it. They learn it just like that, and they never come to the conclusion that that expression can be used in many other contexts to express many other things, all of them related to description. For example, it is true that if I ask them to tell me, ¿cómo es tu vida desde que te casaste? And I am asking them to describe it, not only to say whether, fine, or not only that. I want them to tell me their routine. The first thing they do is, ¿cómo, how, which in this context probably is not that bad, but if I want a description, they need to know that they can use what be like, but now they will have to change the subject and they will have to change the tense. As they learned the sentence as a chunk, what is the weather like? That's the only thing they can say. And they cannot move away, stay away from that. They just have this tunnel vision. So they see life, or they see the language is so very broken down into fragments that they don't have the flexibility of mind to express themselves. And I think that low-level students need to be able, more or less, to express themselves in anything, to express anything within their means, their linguistic means. I mean, one of the things I tell my students to do at low levels, for example, lower intermediate, or even elementary, I ask them to transfer the following sentence. I tell them, okay, can you tell me how you would say that in English? Hay un alto grado de contaminación en las capas altas de la atmósfera. The first thing they do is to get astounded. How can we say that? And the way I tell them they can say it is, the air is dirty. Obviously, that implies that they have had to discriminate information that they think they cannot transfer in a faithful way. But the basic idea has been got over, which is the fact that there is pollution in the air. The air is not healthy. So, which is a kind of mediation activity, because we have to discriminate what is important. We have to simplify and adapt it, not only to our listener, but to our own, let's say, tool set. So how can we use that double-ended or bipolar system of language one and language two in such a way that we transfer our thoughts from one to the other? Obviously, copying from language one to language two is not a very good idea, because what we are doing really is not copying the language, we are copying the strategies. And what we have to learn how to do is to express the same idea, but moving from the strategies that this language is using to these strategies that the other language is using, which are quite different. You cannot simply copy word by word. If we look away from that, if we try to avoid translation and we look away from that, what we are doing is that we are not facing the problem. We have to face the problem. And I think that means that we have to instruct our students, we have to teach them, we have to train them, to teach them the skill of doing that. So when a student is a low-level student, the first thing they have to do is to simplify their own sentence in their own mother tongue, because by doing that in a parallel way, they will be simplifying the conceptualization of the idea. And when you have simplified the idea, then you follow a certain procedure from my point of view, from a very humble point of view, the time tense structure, which I will talk about on a different video. And by doing that, it's a kind of filter by which you adapt the strategy from language one, in this case Spanish, to the strategy of language two, in this case English. If we try to avoid this transfer of ideas from language one to language two, by doing that, that's why a great deal of exercises we do are a gap fill. What happens with the gap fill? That with the gap fill, what we are doing is pointing to the thing that we want them to say. We give them the context with the gap, and we are pointing, this is what I want you to say. So either they know it or they don't know it. But the problem with that is that we spare them the trouble of choosing the tools that they want to use in order to express themselves in language two. And discrimination of tools, choice of tools, and in a way, awareness of the tools we are in possession of in order to discriminate them is another skill that I think they need in order to express themselves. That's why I think language one is so very important, because with language one, I tell them, okay, say this idea. In order to transfer it, they have to know, they have to be aware of all the things they hear, which means that they have to activate them. We have to help them to activate them. So they have to be aware of these tools in the first place. And in the second place, they have to discriminate a number of them and choose the ones they would like to use in order to express that. The question is, how can we activate those tools? And I think by forcing them into transferring one idea from language one to language two is a positive way. If we want to steer them into using a specific structure in English or a specific expression in English, probably transformations are a better way of doing so. I mean, if I start with one sentence, for example, nos han aprobado. Nos han aprobado. And I give them a clue. For example, been. If I give them that clue, it means that I force them into using the passive voice. But I haven't really told them anything about use the passive. They have to come to that conclusion themselves. This is a very basic, simplistic example. But by giving them one word, by this kind of transformational-like exercise, we are steering them, we are pointing to a specific structure, but at least they have to produce the whole sentence. It's not just filling in a gap in which they only recognize the rest of the sentence and they only have to produce one word. Sometimes they only have to copy the verb given in bracket or in parentheses because it's a present simple. And the only thing they have to do is to copy it. So they do absolutely nothing and they produce absolutely nothing. And that's why sometimes you find that in high level groups, you find students make stupid mistakes from basic, from lower levels. I think that's the main cause of it, in my humble opinion, obviously. So what I try to do is that to train them into transferring when I am at lower levels, from one language to the other. When I am at a higher level, what I usually do, instead of the transference is, instead of from language 1 to language 2, instead of transfer, what I do is an upgrading. I ask them to upgrade, which means that from a simplistic sentence, I ask them to upgrade that the way they consider most appropriate. And sometimes I also use a kind of transformation or rephrasing strategy. I don't know. For example, let me think. This experience tells us that we have to act very soon, because if we don't, the situation will get worse. And I give them the word call. How can you use the word call in that sentence? So usually, first I give them the sentence homework. Obviously, they have to work out how they can express the same thing by using the word call. But once they have done that, they know that every time they want to say that a specific thing is a warning, that we have to act urgently, this conceptual area will be transferred or will be synthesized into a wake-up call, because they had to discern it themselves. And then after that, every time they want to say that something is telling me that I have to act now, that something is a wake-up call. This is my humble opinion of why a transference is very important. First, from language 1 to language 2, and then from a simplistic use of language 1 to an upgraded use of language 2. On a different video, I would like to express what's the filter that I give my students to transfer their thoughts from language 1 to language 2. I hope that this has been useful. Thank you.